Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, howdy there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on another fun-filled episode. Today, I am joined by the one and only Logan Albright from Free the People. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Logan, thank you for joining the program, and thank you for all the work you have been doing along with the amazing team of over at Free the People, headed by the great Matt Kibbe and the wonderful Terry Kibbe. You guys have done phenomenal work, and you help tell stories, which is, I think, sometimes an underutilized art that we could really focus on in the greater liberty world, and we're kind of going to be doing that today because you have a brand new book called Conform or Be Cast Out, and there's a reason people hear that and they might say, that sounds familiar. Logan, maybe it's because it sounds a little something like, here, let me go ahead. Yeah, this is great audio. Here we go. A little like this. Now, your astute audio listener is going to be like, hey, I know that sound. That's the sound of Rush. Yes, and the greatest drummer alive, Neil Peart, Subdivisions. And that's one of the lines from that song. And I'll pause here because I know that's going to be hard to hear over.
Sadly, no longer the greatest drummer alive.
Oh, that's right. I know. I just actually forgot about that. Now I remember again, and now I'm sad. Yes, Neil Peart, rest in peace. One of the best drummers, though, of all time. I remember there was the video of him doing a drum solo. It was like a 9-minute video, and he's just a master at his craft. But beyond the actual work he does from the percussion standpoint, going to the songwriting, the lyrics, I would love to hear, starting off, Logan, as we look at your storytelling. What was the inspiration that you took from Neil Peart, from Rush, as you go ahead and author your book Conform or Be Cast Out?
Yeah, so actually, I had the idea for the book first. It's something that I've been kind of mulling over for a while. And the basic thesis of the book is to look at the ways in which societies have punished or demonized nonconformists throughout the history. And I'm looking at a very specific type of demonization, a literal demonization, in which people are identifying nonconformists with some sort of metaphysical evil, whether it be devil worship or witches or demonic possession or something like that. And the title just suggested itself to me like very naturally because I am a big Rush fan. I listen to all their stuff and I love that song. It's one of my very favorites of theirs. And it just was a happy accident that title fit perfectly. I actually have on the cover of my book here, this is an illustration from Paradise Lost, and you see Lucifer being cast out for his unwillingness to conform. So it just fit perfectly, and I think it's a great title and very catchy, and I do owe Neil Peart a debt of gratitude for that.
So I'm just guessing, shot in the dark, that the idea of nonconformity maybe came top of mind in an era of, this past 2 almost years now, which is horrifying to even think about, of this COVID-ism that's been going around, this institutionalized hypochondriaism that I found. Hypochondria, whatever the word is. Regardless, if you don't conform to it, you're looked at sometimes like you have 4 heads, like you are a demon. Dig into that. Is that maybe something that inspired you to focus on this specifically right now, Logan?
Well, actually, no, because I wrote this book in 2019 and it's just taken a while to get published. But, to quote another Rush lyric, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, like things just are always the same. You have the same struggles over and over again. And, it happens to be incredibly relevant right now, which is, I guess, fortunate for me in a certain sense, but I'd rather it not be the case how relevant it is, because we're certainly in an era where we're being very heavily pressured to conform to a certain mindset, even when it doesn't make any logical or scientific sense.
Yeah, well, conformity right now, if you don't conform, you're looked at like, let's go back to the very beginning. And that's also kind of scary that you hadn't written that when COVID came, because that's just speaking to, these themes kind of carry throughout history. And we need to learn from it. The history doesn't repeat itself necessarily, but it certainly rhymes. But when you're looking at this literal demonization, I would love to see, because you obviously can look at the confines of what's happening with this COVID hysteria. you see a lot of people who can't have conversations. And I would love to sit, have you dig into when you're going into the actual, is it a story that you're telling, a narrative? And if so, how are you articulating this conformity in the lens of the actual story itself?
It's not a single narrative, but I'm trying to trace the phenomenon through its historical roots through a variety of high-profile incidents throughout history and in a number of different facets. Like there's a chapter on medical nonconformism, which is incredibly relevant right now, and there's a chapters about the Salem witch trials and the Inquisition and things like that. One of my favorite subjects is the Satanic Panic of the 70s and 80s, in which there was this specter of these satanic rituals that didn't exist, that people were freaking out about and afraid of, and their fear led them to do horrible things and ruin people's lives. That's something that we're certainly seeing right now, and where fear has taken over the mainstream narrative, and people are just terrified, and we're seeing this where you refuse to do something maybe with your own body or with your children that you're demanded to do, and they're not only disagreeing with your choice to do that, but they're kind of trying to categorize you as some sort of moral evil because you're refusing to get vaccinated, or you don't want to get your children vaccinated, or you don't want to wear a mask outside by yourself. You're a bad person. You're hurting other people. And it's this kind of moralizing, this moral majority, which used to be on the right. A lot of the examples in my book come from the Christian right, people who are saying, you have to obey our way of doing things or else you're morally wrong. And now we're seeing it on the left. So, it's both sides are certainly culpable of this.
Oh, let's go, Brandon. Just look at if you don't conform to that being just like the worst thing ever said, you also look like you're one of the people with three heads. But you're touching on what you're talking about in an article you actually just wrote over at the Brownstone Institute. I'm going to go ahead and look here. It's medical nonconformity and its persecution. And you start off, the tendency for society to exert pressure on its members to conform to certain behavioral norms is nothing new. It's easy to see how in the earliest human societies where the basic survival was precarious at best, the nonconformist might represent threat to a group's stability and would therefore be discouraged by whatever means necessary. Right there, just hit the nail on the head in terms of what just happened over the past 2 years and how people not only have been reacting, but also how they've been really conditioned to react. You look at what I would look at the mainstream corporate media and what they have done in terms of helping propagate this COVID fear porn. It's ridiculous. You can at one point acknowledge the dangers of COVID, but at the same point in time have a rational ability to make logical decisions based on the number one, the data and information available, but number two, your own personal risk assessments. I don't know what's so crazy about that we can make risk assessments. We do it every single day. You drive to work in the day, you're making a risk assessment that you could get in a car accident, that somebody could be a drunk driver and hit you. All these bad things could happen, but we still make these decisions. But then you apply, well, it's a virus, Logan. It's a virus, and it could be in the air, and you could be unintentionally putting people at risk. And that becomes a hard argument. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, there were articles, tweets, all galore. There's no libertarians in a pandemic. Remember all that? That was so much fun.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's like, actually, everybody pretty much ends up being a libertarian at the end of a pandemic. And that's why I think, we're recording here on election night. I have a strong gut feeling we're going to see Glenn Youngkin just trample Terry McAuliffe there in Virginia. Knock on wood if I'm wrong, but fingers crossed, because I think that will be a start to a big change. But going back to the conformity, how do we answer that? Because, at the onset, there's a lot of libertarians, and I'm not going to point fingers, though I could easily, who were like, oh, yeah, well, they're right. We could end up hurting people. And they unfortunately play the role of useful idiot. But what would be that answer to well, you could have a virus. You could get other people sick. Logan, what should be the libertarian response?
There's a couple of ways you could answer that question. I think there's a historical argument and there's sort of the knowledge problem argument. First of all, if you look at historical examples where the government has tried to mandate certain types of medical procedures or, heavily encourage medical procedures, it doesn't always end well. It's ended very badly. I'm really fond of pointing out the eugenics experiments in the early 20th century, which nobody ever likes to talk about. They're kind of buried in history. I don't think they're taught in schools. but the government was forcibly sterilizing tens of thousands of American citizens without their consent, and because they thought it would improve the race. It was this idea of, if we make sure that unfit people don't breed, our race will be better in the future for the common good, which is a really evil idea, but was very popular and mainstream at the time. And we elected a eugenicist president in Woodrow Wilson. So this is not a fringe movement. And that was horrible. And we only stopped when we went to war with the Nazis and realized that they were doing the same thing. And maybe it wasn't a good look for us. But you have other things like the thalidomide experiments too, where you had all these babies born with deformities. And you have these like the radium girls, where radium was this new treatment that was put in toothpaste and mints and chewing gum and stuff, and just caused massive amounts of radiation poisoning. The people in charge, or the people in government, I don't even want to give them the dignity of calling them in charge. They don't know everything, and they make mistakes. And when you mandate something on a population-wide level, if it goes wrong for everybody. And so it's much better to let people make their individual choices, and some are going to make the right choice and some are going to make the wrong choice, but you don't run the risk of just wiping out an entire group of people because you made the wrong decision and mandated it for everybody. So that's a really strong argument against those type of mandates, I think.
I had this conversation with one of my employees a couple weeks ago. We were going back and forth, on a lunch break, just mental jujitsu, and it was fun. He's a little bit younger, and he's definitely more left leaning. And I've gotten to the point now where I think he's starting to understand that he's actually more of like I almost say a left libertarian, which I know that a lot of people are in the audience are like, what? But it's more so the understanding that, hey, if you are going to go ahead and have a society, almost like a voluntary society, right? If you want to go pay crazy amounts of taxes, sure, go have that world, and then we'll have our world. That's fine. I think he's starting to find he's more of that. But one of the arguments that I keep on going back to when I'm having this conversation, it's not even really an argument, it's just more of a question I'll pose to him, and I'll say, okay, so what will you do in the situation that whatever your moral good person is doing all of a sudden gets replaced by the worst person in the world? What will you do then? And every time he's just kind of has that moment, and you realize he's starting to get it, because if you have a situation where that one person, good or bad, for good purposes or nefarious purposes, will have that top-down decision, it impacts everybody. There is no ability for market recourse. And you had another great line in the article. I was actually scrolling here when you were talking to try to find it. You say, I recently stumbled across a reference to mandatory vaccination in a 1905 essay entitled How I Became a Socialist by Jack London. London explains that he was forcibly injected by a medical student during a period of incarceration for vagrancy, and cites the incident as part of a long list of grievances against how the poor are treated. And this is where you go into the quote. I strayed into Niagara Falls, was nabbed by a fee-hunting constable, denied the right to plead guilty or not guilty, sentenced out of hand to 30 days imprisonment for having no fixed abode and no visible means of support, handcuffed and chained to a bunch of men similarly circumstanced, carted down country to Buffalo, registered at the Erie County Penitentiary, had my head clipped and my budding mustache shaved, was dressed in convict stripes, compulsorily vaccinated by a medical student who practiced on such as we, made to march the lockstep and put to work under the eyes of guards armed with Winchester rifles, all for the adventuring in blonde, beastly fashion. Wow. I mean, and that's from 1905, and now we're seeing, again, this conversation take place. And one, I know, Twitter is not real life. I get that. However, there are people on Twitter who are real people. And I've seen some people, especially in the pro-Australia, New Zealand camp, I don't think that would be anything they would be too upset with, Logan.
Yeah, and I think that that London quote is particularly interesting because he was a committed socialist throughout his life, and he is articulating a lot of the complaints that you see the modern socialist movement complaining about, which I think that they rightly complain about, things like police abuses and prison abuses and the way that the poor are treated by the state, which I totally agree with those complaints. And one of his complaints is that they're injecting him with medicine against his will. And like, you would think people who are worried about police power and who are worried about persecution of the poor would have a problem with this, because, you know, it's the poor who suffer under these things always. And we know now that, you know, minority communities are the ones who have the lower vaccination rates across the country. And they may have very good reason to be skeptical of vaccinations, and historically speaking. And but trying to coerce them into doing this, it doesn't seem to fit with the other complaints that the socialists have about the abuses of police power.
Well, how do we win them over then, right? Because this whole show is focused on sales and marketing. So let's go back to the nonconformity argument from the onset. This is the mentality we have to at least get them to be open with. And I mean, let's maybe go back a step. Are they the market now? I mean, I see a lot of people on the far left, I would say, have kind of given up on principles in pursuit of power. That's scary to me.
Well, it's starting to happen on the right too. You're seeing a reactionary right wing saying, well, if the left is just going to be after power, we might as well do the same thing because it's us or them at this point. And both sides are very frightening to me. I think there's so few people at principle left that it's really scary to see that. And I don't honestly know how to persuade them on what we're trying to do at Free the People is to show people that this is not a good way. I had hoped, going back to the point that you made about the people in power, I had hoped that the Donald Trump administration would wake a lot of people up to the fact that when you give the president such unlimited, unchecked power and someone like Donald Trump becomes president, that may not be good for everybody. Maybe we should be a little careful about that. It doesn't seem to have taught anybody that lesson. So I don't know, but I just try to have kind of one-to-one conversations with people and say, you have to realize if this can be used to do something you want, it can also be used to do something you fear and hate. Yep. And that's the nature of power.
Well, I use that as one of the main arguments. Not even I keep on saying the word argument. I think that's just like in our mind now what you have to say whenever you're making a position. That's the premise. There we go of my book. I wrote the ebook. 4 Easy Steps to Help Sell Liberty to Friends and Family. And the whole idea is that you don't have to be the person standing in the front of the auditorium with a crowd of 300. You don't have to be the person sitting behind the microphone talking to an audience of thousands. No, what you can do is you can be the person at the water cooler talking to Bill and Jan and just listening to what they're talking about, the issues they care about. And then if they're open, you can tell. And this is the other thing too. You can tell when somebody is open for business, right? If they're ready to have a conversation, you can tell, and when you enter into that conversation, if you're willing to offer solutions and truly help them uncover not just, what the pain points are, but how they can actually overcome them, show them that path forward right there. I find that I get more success going that route than browbeating people, than arguing with people. If anything, arguing with people just reinforces the positions that you believed in the first place. And then you have what we have now, what you just talked about, right? The two sides who have gotten even more polarized, and now they're just going to wield power. And you have two fists just fighting each other. And what do you do? And let me ask you this. What do you do? How do we turn down the intensity, turn down the rhetoric to be able to at least have, I would say, the larger group of people in the middle to be able to have a civil, rational conversation?
Well, I think that it has to be done on the individual level. I don't know if there's kind of a scalable mass way to do this because there has to be a foundation of trust in order to get people to think about what you're saying and listen to you. I've always said that you can't change other people's minds. They can only change their own minds, and they have to be in a position where they're willing to make that change. So I've been having all kinds of great conversations about this book with people. I've been talking, there's kind of a broad crossover appeal in the topic of the book. So like I had an interview the other day with a fundamentalist Christian, and then the very next day I had an interview with the guy from the Satanic Temple. And they were both fantastic conversations, and we listen to each other, and we disagree on certain things, but we share a basic, desire to live free and to, be able to express ourselves without being persecuted. And so you really have to get people who are willing to listen to you and have those conversations. And then if you publish those conversations, then maybe other people will find them and learn something from them. But I really think you have to build that foundation of trust, because otherwise people are just going to think that you're trying to sell them something. You're trying to convince them of something that they don't want to be convinced of. And they put their shields up. And once their shields are up, you're not going to make any headway whatsoever. So you have to show them that you're a good person and that you're not out to hurt them or control them. You just here's my ideas, listen to them. I think that's the way you have to go about it. But it's really hard.
I'm fist bumping off camera here, Logan, because in sales, that is easily one of the most underappreciated and underutilized skills is building that natural trust. And you do that by being authentically you and showing you care and building that connection. If you just go in and you show that you're just trying to sell something, right there, red flags go up. They're like, oh, this guy has commission breath. I know he's just trying to sell me something. And one of the things I make it a point to do whenever I engage in a conversation with a person on the phone, if I'm having a next step and stuff, and I'm able to build some rapport, I feel comfortable, or rather, I feel they're more comfortable enough for the email. I'll say, by the way, what are one or two worst things you hate about sales, guys? And you know what they always are? Number one, they're always trying to sell me something that I don't need. Meaning they don't care about what I actually need, what problems I have. And number two, they don't make me feel special. They just make me feel like I am a means to an end. So if I need to hit my quota at the end of the month, then it's just, it's this person plus this person equals ka-ching. And I've made my quota and on to the next. And that's not a salesperson. That's an order taker who's just going on to the next. So we see this in politics too. And that's why I think what you're doing along with Matt and the team over at Free the People has been so successful. Because, I mean, I took the documentary, you guys with Thomas Massey, and I've been able to share it with lefty friends, and they didn't realize it was, it's that Thomas Massey, the COVID Thomas Massey. And then all of a sudden, like, their brains explode because as they watch the documentary, they don't think of him that way. They think of him as this guy who's this eco-friendly guy living on a self-sustaining farm in Kentucky, and he's just happens to be a congressman. And
it humanizes him and shows that he's more than just a set of political positions.
Bingo. And that, I think, right there is exactly the path that we need to take if we want to have long-lasting success, even if it's not necessarily on the micro level. And if we're trying to build some type of solution going forward as a larger movement, that is the template that works. So follow the template at least, instead of just trying to reinvent the wheel every single time. But back to what we want to talk about, and that is your book. So we obviously Conform or Be Cast Out. We want people to be able to go ahead and find that. Now, where can they go ahead and find that? I was going to our email here. I didn't see a link. Where can they go ahead and purchase this bad boy?
Right. Well, it's available on Amazon.com right now. It's actually coming out December 1st, so you can pre-order it now. Great Christmas gift for people who are looking for something. Available on Amazon.com, on BarnesandNoble.com, wherever fine books are sold. I believe the ebook is due to be out imminently, so if you want an ebook rather than a paperback, you can get that as well. You can also go to my website, which is LoganAlbright.com, and view all of my work there. And that's the way to get it. But there's lots of different avenues to purchase it. If you don't want to go through Amazon, you can go through the publisher directly, or you can go through Barnes & Noble or any of those other sites.
And how about this? If they do want to go to Amazon, I'll make it easy. We'll make it an easy show link here, briannicholsshow.com/conform. How about that? I'll bring you right to the link. And how about this? For the end of the show, Logan, what I'd like to do is give you a platform to really focus on anything from the conversation today that you want the audience to leave with. And obviously the nonconformity, I think, is something that we focused on, and I think we really should hammer home. So is there anything in that world you want to focus on specifically? And then otherwise, anything top of mind? Fire away, my friend.
Yeah, I think that, like, first and foremost, that I consider myself an individualist. There's all these labels you can apply. I call myself a libertarian. I call myself an anarchist. But, first and foremost, I'm an individualist because I value the dignity and the sovereignty of the individual. And that's kind of what the motivating factor for this book is, to celebrate people and to defend people who embrace their individuality and who go out on a limb and do something different. And the point I like to make about this is that while, in primitive societies, being a nonconformist could be dangerous to the group, it's also impossible to make any progress without people who are willing to do something different. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're never going to stagnate. You're never going to do anything different. So we need nonconformists in society to bring us forward and to do things. And when you have this inherent hostility towards them and wanting to beat them down and persecute them and stop them from being different and demand conformity, you're inhibiting progress itself. And while there are certainly types of nonconformism that aren't good, there's per se, I think nonconformity should not be punished just because it's different. And I think that we're all individuals and we can all find something within ourselves that's a little different from everybody else. And we wouldn't want that to be attacked by other people. So we should extend the same generosity and charity to other people.
It's okay to be different. Not only is it okay to be different, actually in sales, being different is a differentiator, which helps you win. That being said, Logan, it's a great conversation. And folks, again, you want to go ahead and get the book, briannicholsshow.com/conform. Conform or be cast out. Thank you so much, Logan Albright, for joining us here on today's episode of The Brian Nichols Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.